Age. Better late than never. I realize it's been a little bit of a time since the last one of these I did, but, been busy, what can I say? And we are coming back into it with a big one. This is the third album by Glénat Éditions for their Cimmérien line of adaptations of Conan stories. This one is Beyond the Black River. This is an important story. Originally published in Weird Tales of May 1935, and previously adapted in Savage Sword of Conan, number 26 and 27, as I recall, in 1978. This one was very special to Howard, and it's the first one of his Conan tales that actually takes a great deal of inspiration from not so much ancient history or, exotic locales, but very much his own neck of the woods. This one is very much a Western frontier tale told in a Conan story, specifically taking place along the Aquilonian border between them and the Pictish territories along the eponymous Black River. So, in this one, Conan is working as a scout mercenary for the Aquilonians who are colonizing that particular area, and over a single night, their colony gets wrecked. Conan has to fight off a Pictish sorcerer and his demon allies, and, well, things go down. This one is famous for, being one of the most well-regarded of the Conan stories, especially by critics and fans alike. And it's also the source for a particular line, which I will read verbatim right now. The final line of the entire story. "Barbarism is the natural state of mankind," the borderer said, still staring somberly at the Cimmerian. "Civilization is unnatural. It is a whim of circumstance, and barbarism must always ultimately triumph." Now that's one hell of a way to finish a story, and it very much is almost the capstone, the final period point on that whole philosophy. That is a very interesting encapsulation of that barbarism versus civilization theme that runs throughout all the Conan stories, and in a sense, run itself through all sword and sorcery, really, from, inception. And, we will get into that because there are some, particularities about that, but it was very much one of the reasons why this story was so important to Howard, because it really was something he wanted to say about something. And it's very much that, feeling of not only civilization versus barbarism, but also, the ambiguity of that particular conflict, where there isn't necessarily a good side on either end. But we'll get into that. So, right now we are talking about the work of one Mathieu Gabella and Anthony Jean, doing the scripting and the art respectively. I'm not too familiar with their previous work, sad to say, but I do like what I'm seeing here. I might want to look into it, especially as we get started out with the art. The art is very, very detailed, good ink work, lots and lots of detail, especially in the environments, because this whole tale takes place in forests, in wilderness, and you get to see so much of the leaves, the grasses, the trees. You really feel the environment through the art there. All the imagery really just says, this is wilderness. Here there be, well, among other things, monsters. But, you don't belong here if you're not part of that wilderness. Luckily for Conan, he, has a foot in each world, so he can handle that. Which is, a plot point, to be honest. About the only negative I could say is that the colors are somewhat muted. It gives everything a very autumnal look, but I can see how that might be displeasing to certain people who prefer brighter colors. It does really work very well for the nighttime scenes. As I said, this story takes place over a single night. Really, the more muted stuff, where it's a lot of beiges and, very, very, very pale oranges and stuff like that, is primarily during the daylight scenes. So, at the start of the story, you see the sunlight coming over the mountains, illuminating the place, and it is, not a particularly bright and sunny day, so to speak, in spite of the fact there's not a cloud in the sky. But as the story goes on, and, night falls, and you really much get into the deep darkness of the forest itself, then the muted color palette really does fit a lot more. And, of course, the blacks in the use of black in the images are really, really well done. You get a lot of good negative space. You also get deep shadows, which is very appropriate for this kind of thing. About the only places where you do get brighter colors is when there's fire involved in the scene. So when Balthus is captured, Balthus being the main viewpoint character, if not the actual protagonist of the story itself, is captured by the Picts and tied up to a stake, about to be sacrificed to the god Jebel Shag by being devoured alive by his various beasts. All the different flames and stuff. Eventually Conan comes in and sets fire to the village as a distraction, and there you really do get things brightening up with flames and everything. There's also the scene where the Picts actually destroy the Aquilonian fort that's guarding the entire area, and you get a nice big image of the whole place just going up. And there, that very much shows the kinds of colors we're talking about here. The other one is when a demon summoned by Zogar-Sag, the evil sorcerer, to take out his victims and to eventually take out Conan, it appears, and it appears as this green, unnatural, eldritch-looking flame that eventually, takes on a physical form, much to its disadvantage, as it turns out. Taking on physical form means you can get attacked by physical objects, so that was a bad move on his part. The other bad move was, joining a sorcerer, joining your life force to a demon in order to summon it into existence, only to send it off against Conan, because, feedback loops are a real problem. Yeah. So, yeah. The other place where you'll see a lot of flame is in flashbacks that occur to the fall of the city of Venarium, which was another Aquilonian colony in the past, only that one was set up in Cimmérien, and it is where in the initial story it is simply just like a line that's mentioned, like, oh yeah, the Cimmerians destroyed that city, years ago. Yeah, I know. I was there. Oh, you were? Yeah, I was one of the guys who set it on fire. It's one of the little bits of backstory that's added to Conan's history in this story. Here, though, there are multiple flashbacks to that point, which we'll go over them when we get to the scripting part of this story. But yeah, there too, flames everywhere, as you can imagine. So that's pretty much it for the art. I don't have that much to say about it. It's simply that it is really, really, really good. There's lots of detail, the fine work on the inking and stuff like that, the line work. Like, if you look on page 10 here, this first time you get to the fort, before it gets raised, of course, and you see each and all the little lines in the palisade, all the, you can almost like feel the wood grain when just looking at those planks. There's lots of great detail like that. It just feels right, so to speak, Also, when you look at, the houses of the Picts and such as that, you've really, all the little detail of little, tiny little ink work that really adds up in the end. So yeah, lots and lots of great A+ work on this. Also, I like the speed lines that happen during fights and such. It really just adds some dynamism to this. I like especially page 30. Balthus and Conan being attacked by Picts, and you get that sense of just like everything zooming in on them, just rush of combat. Not to mention, it really just demonstrates just how bloody this story is. It's basically like a non-stop chase at a certain point. And you very much, even with the muted colors, you definitely get a lot of red. So lots of good stuff. There is one other thing there. As they're escaping the Pictish village, Conan and Balthus run into Zogar-Sag's temple/tent and encounter this great bull ape that he has chained, that he has inside his, in the story, the original story, it's chained, but here it's not for some reason. It's not that important. But here, the ape attacks, and Conan quickly dispatches it, just like in the story. But the downside here is that the actual panel where Conan dispatches it is all tiny at the bottom of the corner. I would have had it a bit bigger, maybe move the ape a little bit more to the left to create room, because here it's a little bit awkward to look at and see exactly what's happening. That's about my only negative in terms of the panel spacing throughout the entire thing. Yeah, you get lots of, in terms of the paneling, otherwise it's always really great. You get lots of nice inserts and close-ups of different things during the major battles and such. I like the way, it's almost like, the camera panning to various things, cutting between the close-ups of certain things, like people's faces, and then moving on to wide shots. It's, feels very cinematic in certain ways. Lots of long panels as well. So yeah, in terms of the art, no complaints on my part other than some small niggling details. Which brings us to the writing. And this is very much an unabridged adaptation of the original Conan story. There's nothing missing, as far as I can tell. There's nothing really added to it. No extra, embellishments or anything like that. It is a straightforward adaptation to its benefit, frankly. There's very few ways you could update and, improve upon the original Conan story. I mean, I suppose you could add boobs to it, but frankly, aside from a couple of, Pictish ladies not wearing their tops, which, is perfectly reasonable for them. And, none of them look like they had any boob jobs, so it's not there for titillation or anything like that. This is very much a non-sexy Conan tale. They do exist, believe it or not. And it does really add a bit to the grim and grittiness of this particular story, which, again, was very much... Howard was not sure it would get accepted by Weird Tales and Farnsworth Wright, the editor, simply because it lacked that aspect, which is, one of the selling points that he had with Weird Tales for other stories. There's a reason why when Margaret Brundage did a cover for a Conan story for Weird Tales, typically it wasn't Conan that was on the cover, it was the lady of the story that was on the cover, and she wasn't wearing much. Hey, we all have our tastes, and she had hers. But yeah, in terms of the actual writing there, you get a good, distillation of the original story. All the, main plot points are all there. There's nothing missing. I do think there's a couple of interesting little bits. If we're looking at page 28, for instance, while they're, hiding, while Conan and Balthus are hiding out in the cave after they've escaped from the Pictish encampment, Conan goes into a little discussion of, all the stuff he's been doing, all the places he's been, things. And he mentions, I've been everything except a king. And in the original story, he kind of laughs at that a bit. And then, just moves on. Here, Balthus, actually says, one day, perhaps. And then he mentions, king me? Ugh, rather dead. There's nothing less free than a king. Which is kind of ironic, because this story, chronologically, takes place not too long before he eventually becomes king of Aquilonia, after the usurpation. And it's the events during this story that will lead him to have the popular support he needs to do that. His, work saving the Aquilonian colonists from, the Picts and stuff like that, and coming to their defense when their kingdom wouldn't. And that is a major plot point in the story. It's one of the reasons why Conan is able to, has this job, essentially, is because Aquilonia wants the territory, but it's not willing to do what it takes to, properly garrison the new province or, take care of its colonists. And that is something that happens quite a bit. And one of the reasons why the garrison gets completely fried. And yeah, it is very much like something that's brought up multiple times, even by the colonists themselves. Here, like for instance, on page 36, an old woman really goes into it. It's like, the Picts are just defending their territory from us. The Aquilonians want the territory, but they won't defend it, and we're getting caught in the crossfire. We just want to make a better life for ourselves. And you get the feeling here, and this is something that Howard would, when he was writing this story, was thinking about quite a bit, is that, yes, the whole barbarism versus civilization thing that's recurring here. Barbarism has its good points. You're free. You're no longer being stifled by corrupt, decadent laws or, unfair and arbitrary, judgments of others. But it's also nasty, brutish, and short, as Thomas Howes would put it. And when he was discussing this story with his friends and, others in letters, he was always discussing that this was very much a story about all the little nice things that civilization brings you. The little things that make it worth defending. And that is very much, here, because ultimately, this is a story about defending a little bit of civilization from a barbaric onslaught, which is a recurring thing because you also see these flashbacks throughout, ever since after, as soon as Conan mentions that he was at Venarium, as I said. You get that first flashback here on page 6 here. It's just a faraway shot of Venarium burning. Balthus mentioning that his uncle was there when the Cimmerians took the city, a complete massacre. And, Conan mentioned that, yeah, you said that. We never didn't leave a single house there. And you both this thing, wait, you were there? Yeah, I'm Cimmerian. Ironically, fun fact, Conan was 15 at that time, and as far as I recall, he's mentioned as having been one of the first ones over the wall when Venarium fell. So, yeah, he got up to some shit in that particular battle. In fact, it's one of the, as I recall from certain chronologies, it's possibly the first major battle that Conan was ever in. I'm kind of surprised. I think it was years later that someone did a pastiche version, his tale, Conan at Venarium or something like that. I'll have to see if I can remember that. That actually shows, the events there. But that was years later. Howard himself never described it. It was basically just a single line put into this story and never again. But you do get, as the story goes along, more and more kind of flashbacks, single panel flashbacks, nothing major, but just flashbacks to that particular event. You see then on page 13, a flashback showing the Cimmerians battling the Aquilonians with, Venarium burning in the background. And then further on, on page back over, page 33, as the fort here in Pictland is being burned down by the Picts. You see here, if the first one was the Aquilonians fighting the Cimmerians, here it's the Cimmerians massacring the Aquilonians. You really get the feeling that the Cimmerians have turned the tide of the battle and they are winning here. And it's very much showing they come in numbers, they'll be more motivated than ever. No wall will ever be able to restrain them. Believe me, I know. And he does. And I think the last one... no, not the last one. The other one on page 39, it's Cimmerians, they're no longer fighting. They've won at this point. So you got that progression aspect during the actual flashbacks. And the final one on the last page, during that line that other forester was saying, and it shows first a small insert panel of a small child or young teenager, shadow moving toward him, and then this panel showing Venarium burnt behind him, and the single Cimmerian warrior who looks exactly like this picture of Conan from the cover here, sword and everything. And then the sword being raised, and you never see what happens, of course, because, having your main hero killing children, even if, long ago, it's a bit iffy. But it then follows, with a panel of close-up on Conan's eyes, just looking like, hard, ice-cold stare, blue-eyed stare there. And with that final bit, barbarism will always ultimately triumph. And you get the feeling, this is very much the progression. That is the cycle that is happening here. Barbarians rising to civilization, starting overextending, and then new barbarians coming in to teach them a lesson about it. So that endless cycle of civilizations is going on and on and on. So this is an excellent adaptation of Beyond the Black River. There really isn't that much really to say about it, so to speak. There's no, weird flourishes or, odd choices that really made. It is very much quality work. Simple as that. So I highly recommend picking this one up. It's got some excellent artwork. The story is great. And if you enjoy this story, if you've already read it and you enjoy it, you'll want to pick this up. If you have never read it and you want to check it out and you prefer it in comic form than in the original text, again, pick this up. It's good. So far, Glénat Éditions has been 3 for 3 with these babies, and I know from having read them all, so the ones that have been published so far, that other than the 5th one, Scarlet Citadel, which I will get to when I get to that one, they have all been winners in my take. Frankly, that one I would possibly skip unless you're a completionist, but we'll get to that one, I promise. But so far, I have yet to have one that was a complete train wreck. They have all been, except for that one, consistently good. So really, fine work on all these people. Special shout out to, if I'm not mistaken, who's the... Excuse me one moment. Yeah. The collection is being directed by Patrice Louinet and Jean-David Morvan, so special kudos for them for organizing and getting all this stuff done, for getting all these authors and artists together to get this working. Because this is, I hate to say definitive, because there have been other adaptations of Conan's stories, whether by Dark Horse or Marvel back in the day. Like I said, this one was previously adapted in Savage Sword number 26 and 27. That was back in 1978, as I recall. Yeah, January 1978, right. And yeah, so depending on your tastes, whether you prefer the Roy Thomas era or the Dark Horse ones, you'll find some good, very, very, very good adaptations throughout those. But this one, for Conan, collectors and people who enjoy the character and sword and sorcery, get this one. That's all I gotta say about that. Next one is going to be the Frost Giant's Daughter, and that one is damn good. We'll get more into that when I actually review it. It's the first one of these that's been done by a single author and artist as the same person, so that's going to be interesting to think about. But in any case, that's going to be coming next time. More videos to come as I finish them and post them, so keep watching the channel for those. I've been Bastien. This has been Conan's Le Cimmérien with Au-delà de la Rivière Noire, Beyond the Black River, and I will see you next time.